Today's internet is enormously bigger and more extensive than the original network that started all of this. I'm talking about the ARPANET. Back in those days, the mid to late 1960s and all through the 1970s, computers were big and expensive, and the idea of a personal computer did not yet exist. Computers were too big and too expensive to be owned by an individual, and were principally owned and operated by universities, by businesses, and by governments. The computers that were attached to the network were used by many people at once. These were so-called time-shared computers. There were perhaps 30 to 50 people using the machine at the same time, and then that machine was connected to the ARPANET. The WHOIS information that was associated with the network at that time included information about the people who were in charge of the operation of those time-shared computers. The people were administrators, both technical and supervisory. This information was published in a directory so that if there was a problem, these people would know how to contact each other. For example, if you had a machine, as we did at UCLA in Los Angeles, and there was a machine at, say, MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they were having trouble communicating with each other, these people would get involved. We didn't have the term system administrators at the time, but that's the kind of person we're talking about. They could then talk to each other and sort out whether there was any kind of operational issue. Further, if a user on one of the machines was misbehaving in a way that affected the users of another machine, the supervisory level people would communicate with each other and take appropriate action. An example of the process might be something like this. Suppose you're sitting at the desk of one of these attached computers and you saw some behavior that you thought was inappropriate. You might want to get some help as sorting out who was doing it and what they were doing. You would contact your local administrator and they would contact the administrator at the other end, who would then look and see which user was involved and what they were doing to address the issue. That process was pretty effective when the network was tens or even hundreds of machines, and the number of people involved in the entire network was measured in thousands. But today we're talking about not just tens or hundreds of machines, we're talking about millions of machines. And we're talking about not just a single network, the ARPANET, but we're talking about many, many, many networks that are interconnected with each other, each of which is administered by a different organization and different people and under different rules. After the ARPANET evolved into the internet and the domain name system was created, the WHOIS directory of contact information was repurposed to apply to domain names as well as IP addresses. So the administrative contact information is now related to domain names and IP addresses, as opposed to time-shared computer hosts. And there's quite a difference between the information needs and activities in administering time-shared systems and that needed for domain names. That's a huge transformation that's taken place. What was a small afterthought in the original design of the network, let's just jot down who's in charge of each of the computers and circulate it, has grown up to be something that has a life of its own and is quite transformed from its original purpose. In these videos, I'll describe both the problems and the ideas we've developed in Project Jake to assist the internet community in developing a more complete and effective approach toward managing DNS contact information. And to look ahead a tiny bit, the current term of art is the rather bureaucratic phrase, registration data directory services.